Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back in time, not to some flashy battle or dramatic throne room showdown, but to a sleepy, damp, mist-covered morning on a lake where something far more magical is happening. Farming. That's right, but not just any farming. We're talking about the Aztecs' floating gardens, chinampas, and the strange, quiet world they built on water. Picture this. You're paddling through still, dark water under a low dawn sky, surrounded by gardens that float like lily pads, anchored only by willpower, mud, and maybe some very stubborn reeds. The air smells like wet earth, fish, and the distant waft of corn tortillas being grilled. It's beautiful, it's weird, and honestly, you probably wouldn't survive this world more than a day unless you can fertilize a field with duck droppings and maneuver a canoe with your eyes half closed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're gliding toward the heart of Lake Texcoco. The surface is still as glass, except for the ripples your canoe carves through the morning calm. You can barely see the shore. The city of Tenochtitlan is somewhere behind the mist. What you can see are islands, long, narrow rectangles of green that seem to hover over the water, held up by nothing but faith and a lot of mud. These are chinampas, the floating farms of the Aztec world, and today, you're spending the day as a sleepy gardener drifting between them. Your paddle slices quietly into the water as you drift up beside your plot. It doesn't exactly float. It's anchored to the lake bed with willow trees planted at each corner, but it feels like it does. The mat of woven reeds and branches forms the base, and thick layers of lake mud, compost, and soil pile up on top. You run your hand along the surface. It's soft, alive, and cold. This isn't your average backyard tomato patch. This thing breathes with the lake. You step onto it, and it rocks gently under your weight. Birds scatter from the cornstalks. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks once, like it's clearing its throat and going back to bed. Your neighbors are already out. They nod, not exactly chipper, but not grumpy either. Everyone here is in that half-awake fog where the coffee hasn't kicked in because, well, there's no coffee yet. Just atoll hot corn drink, thick as stew. Basically a warm corn nap in a gourd. The sky turns from blue-gray to orange and pink. As you kneel down beside the plot, tomatoes are already poking through. There's amaranth, squash vines, maybe some chilies. It smells green, lush and damp and a little wild. You start weeding, hands disappearing into the spongy soil. A worm wiggles out, like, "Can I help you?" You flick it gently aside. The chinampa isn't alone. These things stretch in rows across the lake, like the pages of a green book. Each one is separated by narrow canals, meaning your whole garden is basically on a grid of tiny islands. You can only move between them by canoe or on the narrow pathways of packed earth along the edges as the sun climbs. The fog burns off and Tenochtitlan comes into view in the distance. From this angle, it's a floating city. Historians still argue whether it truly floated or just sat on a series of artificial islands. But either way, it looked like Atlantis had a baby with Venice and then handed it a calendar and a farming manual. You pause for a moment and look across the water. Someone is scooping sludge from the bottom of the canal and slathering it onto their chinampa like frosting. It smells not great, but it works. That black sludge is gold here. It's full of nutrients from rotting plants and fish and all the stuff the lake offers up. This is your fertilizer. No synthetic chemicals, no tractor treads. Just you, a canoe, and a shovel. Sometimes you wonder how people ever figured this out. Who looked at a swamp and thought, yeah, let's build a cornfield right there in the middle of that stink and hope it floats. Probably someone desperate, or brilliant, or both. But clearly, it worked. Some archaeologists believe chinampas could yield 7 crops a year with the right care. That's more than most modern farmland. And here you are, elbows deep in a system so efficient. Even modern agronomists are quietly obsessed with it. You stand up, stretch, and almost tip over. Balance is key here. One wrong step and you're in the drink, and it's not exactly bathwater. It's got history in it, like centuries of it, and maybe a few leeches. You hear the whistle of a bird, probably a crackle, then a shout from across the water. Someone's already harvested their morning beans and is headed to the market. You're not in a rush. The garden isn't just about food. It's a way of life. It's religion. It's order in a chaotic world. You press your fingers into the soil again, just to feel the cool weight of it. And think how many generations have done exactly this in exactly this spot. Your reed hut waits at the edge of your chinampa, low and squat and dry, barely the size of a closet. You duck inside for a moment, drink a bit of atole, and grab a reed basket. Your harvest today won't be huge, but it'll be enough. Maybe a few chilies, some squash blossoms, and a bundle of herbs for the woman who trades duck eggs. And as you paddle back out across the canals, you pause and let your fingers drift in the water. It's not just a lake anymore. It's your world. A floating, muddy, miraculous world that shouldn't work but somehow does. The sun hasn't fully crested the rim of the mountains yet, but you're already elbow deep in the beginning of a floating miracle. You crouch beside your chinampa and consider what it actually is, this plot of green that's somehow levitating over lake water. It looks like magic, feels like gardening on a raft. But it's not magic, it's engineering, Aztec style, low-tech, high-skill, and stubbornly effective. You begin your morning chore, rebuilding a new chinampa from scratch. Not because yours is broken, but because you're learning the craft. So you drag over a raft of reeds, tooly thick, springy stuff that grows along the water's edge. You bundle them together and lay them crisscross, forming a mat. It looks like a picnic blanket made for giants. Then comes the brush, dead branches, twigs, anything fibrous. You pack them tight between the reed layers, almost like a giant compost sandwich. This will be your foundation, a floating skeleton. Now for the good part, mud. You slip into the water, shovel in hand, and scoop up heavy gobs of lake-bottom sludge. It squelches, slaps into the reed frame, and immediately tries to ooze back off. You learn, fast press, layer, repeat. Over time, it builds up thick, dark, and fertile. Not the kind of mud you'd want in your shoes, but the exact kind you want in your future cornfield. You step back onto the floating frame and feel it give slightly under your weight. It doesn't sink thanks to the air pockets trapped in the reeds and the way the mud's supported. It just sways, like a sleepy hammock. It feels alive, like it's breathing with you. You smile. It's ugly. It's glorious. Your teacher today is an old man with one tooth and infinite opinions. He's been building chinampas since before you were born. Before his knees gave up, even he squats nearby, chewing something bitter, muttering critiques while showing you how to anchor the corners. You tie long poles to the raft and push them down into the soft lake bed, planting willow saplings that will one day become thick-rooted trees. The willows will grow and stabilize the island over years, slowly replacing rope and human patience. You see, he says, between bites, you're not just growing food, you're growing the land itself, and you get it. You're farming not on the earth, but into it, pulling it up from the water, coaxing it to take shape like a sculptor with swampy clay. Mainstream historians say the Chinampa system was developed during the early post-classic period, long before the Aztecs, and the Aztecs just refined it. But who exactly started it? Historians still argue whether it was the Xochimilca, the Chalca, or some earlier group of lake. Either way, the Aztecs made it iconic. They didn't just copy it, they scaled it like crazy. At their peak, there were over 20,000 hectares of chinampas, producing enough food to feed hundreds of thousands of people, sometimes more. You wipe sweat off your forehead and smear a line of mud across your eyebrow. Stylish, very swampcore. You finish spreading the last layer of soil and begin trenching thin grooves into the surface for drainage and planting. You press corn seeds into the earth, followed by beans and squash. The sacred trio, the three sisters, they call them, each plant helping the others. Corn for structure, beans for nitrogen, squash for weed control. A botanical girl group, if you will. As you work, a dragonfly buzzes past your nose. You flinch and nearly tip over, but regain your balance just in time. Chinampa building is not for the clumsy. You hear a splash behind you and turn to see a neighbor laughing from his own chinampa. That dragonfly's got better balance than you, he says. You nod, fair enough. You look at your creation, not quite a garden yet, but close. Within a few weeks, it'll green up. Within a few months, it'll feed someone. Maybe you, maybe a market customer, maybe a priest performing a maze ritual you'll never see, floating over all. This is a quiet sense of permanence. This isn't just a seasonal plot. A well-maintained chinampa can last for centuries. Some have. That's the weird part. You're not just planting seeds. You're entering into a relationship with the lake. It's a muddy marriage, and the lake is both nurturing and slightly grumpy about it. You take a break and sit on the edge of the island, legs dangling just above the water. You sip atole again, lukewarm now. A few kids paddle by in a canoe too big for them, arguing about fish and ghosts in the canal. One insists he saw a floating skull yesterday. The others laugh. You don't. You've also seen strange things on foggy morning, shapes that might be turtles, might be drowned logs, might be something older. Local legend says the lake spirits don't love chinampas, that the lake was never meant to be tamed this way, that every time you build one, you owe something back. A prayer, an offering, maybe a fish, maybe a secret. You lean forward and drop a pebble into the water. Just in case, a heron glides silently overhead, its wings catching golden light. Your teacher clears his throat and gestures for you to start the second raft. You groan, stretch, and pretend your arms aren't made of noodles now, but you get up anyway. The chinampa won't build itself. The lake certainly won't help. But for all its effort, there's a strange peace in it. You're making land where there was none. You're turning a fluid world into something solid. Something that holds tomatoes. Something that holds you. The lake laps gently at the edges of your island. Somewhere, a frog croaks again. The mist is gone now, and the sun is warming the surface. Everything smells damp and alive. You feel the whole world breathing. Slowly, deeply, sleepily, and the chinampa floats on. You're already tired and the sun's barely halfway across the sky, but your hands keep moving. That's how chinampa farming works. The lake doesn't stop, so neither do you. By now you're into the rhythm of it. Scoop pile, pat, pull weeds, chase. Off a duck, check the willows, adjust the canoe, scoop again. It's repetitive in a hypnotic way, like the world is rocking you to sleep through work. Today you're focusing on what no one talks about: sludge. Aztec gardeners knew the lake wasn't just a body of water, it was a buffet of free fertilizer. You ease your canoe into the narrow canal and begin dredging again, plunging a basket on a stick into the thick black ooze at the bottom. It comes up like molten chocolate cake, only it smells like something between seaweed and old sock. Delicious. This is Talalia Lele, the lake bed. Muck that keeps your floating farm alive. It's packed with decomposed fish bits, rotten plants, and whatever else sank into the water over the centuries. It's gross. It's miraculous. You smear it lovingly across your chinampa, like you're frosting a swampy cake. The Aztecs weren't squeamish about these things. They were practical. They composted everything from kitchen scraps to feathers to, possibly, even human remains after sacrifices. There's some scholarly debate about just how involved those remains were in agriculture. Historians still argue whether human bone meal was a regular fertilizer or more symbolic. Either way, you're glad your current blend doesn't come with moral dilemmas, just fish guts and lily stems. You spot your neighbor hauling something huge into his canoe, what looks like a decomposing fish head, the size of a dinner plate. For the chilies, he says, and you pretend to nod like that makes sense. Everything has a purpose out here, even nightmare bait. It's not just about putting nutrients in, it's about knowing where they go. The Aztecs rotated crops with care, adjusted the canal levels, and built clever sluices and gates to manage water flow. You've got one of those water gates now. It's a clumsy thing made of reeds and mud, but it does the job, redirecting the canal's slow trickle to keep your plot moist without flooding it. On dry days, you use a clay jug to scoop and pour by hand. It's like a gym membership, except your arms just hurt and nobody is impressed. Some days, it feels like you're farming with gravity itself, slowing it down, redirecting it, arguing with it. You remember that one time your neighbor's chinampa sank on one side because his willows weren't deep enough. Everyone laughed until his tomatoes floated away. To keep the balance, you've learned to check the willows regularly. Their roots grow down through the raft into the lake bed, anchoring the entire island. Some of them twist like snakes underwater, holding firm while the surface sways. You lean over the edge of the chinampa and spot one. You reach in and give it a gentle tug. Still solid. Good. You glance back at your compost pile, a neat little stack of kitchen waste, lake weeds, and the occasional amphibian surprise. It's not glamorous, but it's sacred. The Aztecs believed life came from the lake's gifts, and the least you can do is give something back. Today, you toss in the inedible squash stems and a few dead marigold blossoms. A frog croaks approval from somewhere beneath. Your teacher joins you again, pointing at the edge of your chin. Too dry, he says, spitting on the ground for emphasis. He scoops a bit of lake water and splashes it onto the soil. Roots must stay thirsty, not starving. You nod and start adjusting the water level again. It's tedious. It's muddy. It's brilliant. You're participating in a system that unbelievably maintains its own fertility, year after year, just by taking what the lake offers and putting it back into the cycle. The genius is in the simplicity. Chinampas don't require fancy tools, just patience, muck, and a deep understanding of how water wants to move. You've started noticing those things, how a breeze changes the surface current, how dragonflies congregate before rain, how different mud smells signal what lies beneath. Fun fact: some modern scientists have studied chinampas as a model for sustainable urban agriculture. Imagine rooftop gardens that work like these floating farms, self-watering, self-fertilizing, and oddly beautiful. It turns out that something invented over 700 years ago might just outlive us all. You sit back and let the canoe rock gently. The air is warm now, heavy with humidity and the soft whine of bugs. You close your eyes for a second, maybe two. Then something cold touches your ankle. You jolt upright and glance down. A curious fish, a clump of weed, or something more unsettling. You remind yourself that the lake is full of life. Not everything that brushes your leg is a ghost. Probably. You chuckle nervously and shake it off. Your teacher's already back in his boat, paddling away with one arm and snacking on roasted corn with the other. Efficiency goals: you go back to scooping sludge, piling it where the beans will go next. You hum to yourself, something tuneless, and old. Maybe you heard it in the market. Maybe it's been in your head for generations. The chinampa rises just a little more with every layer, taller, stronger, greener. You press your hand into the soil again. It's warm now, alive in a way no concrete rooftop will ever be. The lake sighs around you. Dragonflies buzz. Far off, a paddle slaps the water like a heartbeat. You take a long breath, and for a moment, it's just you and the mud and the floating garden you coaxed into existence. You're finally starting to see some color now. After days of hauling muck and balancing precariously on a spongy raft of roots and branches, your chinampa is blooming. The first pop of marigold orange winks at you from the corner, and there, just beside the amaranth, is a red tomato so perfect it looks fake, like something from a grocery store photo shoot. Except this one is covered in dew and probably has a spider living nearby. You kneel beside it, brush the soil with your fingers, and feel a little proud. This floating patch of muck and miracle is beginning to look like a garden. The Aztecs didn't just grow corn. They were botanical artists. This chinampa now holds a dizzying mix of plants, corn that rustles in the wind like dry paper, beans climbing its stalk like eager toddlers, squash leaves sprawling like green umbrellas. But between those staples, you find bursts of color and fragrance. Semple marigold, used in ceremonies and possibly as insect repellent. Amaranth, both food and sacred offering. Chilies, because flavor is power, and also because apparently mild food was considered suspicious. You pluck a chili and bring it close. It's tiny, bright red, and smells like danger. One of your neighbors once said the Aztecs believed chilies could ward off illness, or at least clear your sinuses so hard that the illness didn't want to stick around. Makes sense. You remember your first taste. You cried openly. It was cleansing, spiritual, and traumatic. You're not alone out here. On the neighboring chinampa, a woman fans smoke over her vegetables. She's tossing in dried chili pods and some kind of herb. The smoke drifts your way sharp, earthy, almost bitter. You cough once and wave it off. Pests hate it, she says from across the water. I hate it too, you reply. She shrugs. Then it's working. Turns out, chili smoke isn't just a dramatic gardening flex. It's pest control. A practice that still baffles modern researchers. How did ancient farmers figure this out? Was there a moment when someone was roasting chilies near their plants and noticed the bugs fleeing in terror? Historians still argue whether this was passed down through oral tradition, experimentation, or divine chili revelation. Either way, it works. You watch a cloud of smoke drift across a row of bean plants and see a few beetles scurry for cover. You consider your own pest situation and look down to find a line of ants claiming your cornstalk like a flagpole. You sigh, grab your own bundle of dried pods, and set them smoldering. Within minutes, your chinampa smells like a pepper-filled campfire, and you're coughing like a backup singer in a salsa band. The ants, gone, or just relocated to someone else's garden. You wave an apology in advance. Not every plant here is food. Some are flowers for rituals, some for medicine. The Aztecs believed certain plants connected them to the gods. Others were used as dyes, perfumes, or even currency in some marketplaces. Your teacher once told you, a chinampa is a church, a pantry, and a pharmacy, all with roots in the same muck. You dig around and find a patch of epazote, a strong-smelling herb used to season beans and possibly exorcise stomach demons. Next to it grows chia, its tiny seeds, destined for drink, thickening, and pretending to be dessert. These aren't just side characters in the story of corn, they're co-stars, ensemble cast, award-winning support, and yet, it's not all beauty. And harvest. You still have to battle weeds, balance water levels, and make sure nothing sinks. You kneel down to adjust one of the side bank's layers of mud and reeds that define your chinampa's shape. It's starting to fray a little. You push more lake sediment up against it, then pat it firm. Like tucking in a baby made of dirt. You've heard stories of chinampas that split open or sank mid-season, their harvest lost to the lake. Usually, those belonged to newcomers who didn't respect the balance, or to the arrogant, or to the lazy, and sometimes, just sometimes, to the cursed. Your neighbor swears one plot is haunted. Everything I plant dies, he said once, glaring at a patch of soggy onions. Even my shovel rusted inside the hut. You haven't seen the haunted chinampa yourself, but now that he's mentioned it, you kind of want to. Back on your plot, you start your morning harvest. The tomatoes are firm, the marigolds blazing, the squash blossoms wide open and yellow like little trumpets. You cut them gently and place them in your reed basket. Later, you'll trade them for eggs or salt, or maybe a new blanket if you get lucky. You pause to admire the variety. It's hard to believe all this came from mud, reeds, and your very tired arms. There's something dreamy about it, like you're farming inside a painting. The lake reflects a dozen different shades of green. Birds dive between the rows. Even the bugs look relaxed when they're not being smoked out. You hear a familiar whistle, the signal from a friend 2 plots over. He's motioning for help, one of his canals is clogging. You paddle over, drop a few jokes about his water management skills, and help clear out the blockage. It's a mess of floating weeds, leaves, and what might be a dead fish with a really bad attitude. You both heave it aside, and the water flows again. You owe me. You say I'll repay you in squash. You always repay in squash. He grins. Then you must be rich. You paddle back, pleased with the progress. The sun is getting higher. The plants are starting to close their blossoms against the heat. You'll finish this round of weeding and head to the market soon. But for now, you pause, basket in hand, eyes half closed, floating farms, floating tomatoes, floating you, and all around, the sound of chinampa's breathing, growing, glowing in the morning sun. It's early, very early. The sky is still that pre-dawn blue that makes everything look like it's underwater. You groan, roll over on your straw mat, and bump your head gently against the curved reed wall of your hut. Classic. You squint through. The doorway, no sun yet, but the lake's awake. You hear paddles slapping the water, distant splashes, and the occasional cough of a neighbor who definitely didn't brush their teeth. This is canoe o'clock. You sit up, still swaddled in your blanket, like a confused tamale. Outside, the floating world is already in motion. You can see the soft orange glow of a torch on a nearby chinampa, and the outline of someone bending over plants with a sleepy slump you recognize all too well. The truth is, chinampa farming is a sunrise job, or even a pre-sunrise job. If you wait until full daylight, you're already late. The sun gets hot fast, and besides, the early paddlers get the best spots at the canalside market. You stretch, rub your eyes, and drag yourself outside. Stepping onto the dew-slick surface of your garden-island, you hop into your canoe, still groggy, basket by your feet. The air smells like lake and soil and wood smoke. Somewhere, a bird calls out once, and then immediately regrets it too early for song. You paddle slowly, with no rush, yet as you float down the canal, other canoes slide past, mostly in silence. Everyone here knows each other, so the greetings are mostly grunts, nods, or the universal chin lift of acknowledgement. You pass by old Yali, who's balancing 2 baskets of flowers and chewing something that looks like it came from a cursed cactus. He nods at you. You nod back. That's about as chatty as it gets before sunrise. The canals are narrow, but you've done this 100 times. Maybe more. You dip your paddle in at just the right angle so the canoe doesn't wobble too much. One time, a new guy flipped his boat, trying to do it fast. He emerged, soaked, his otole floating like a sad milk cloud. You still bring that up. When you need a laugh, you pass a chinampa where 2 kids are already out, chasing ducks off the squash vines with sticks. The ducks, unfazed, quack lazily and paddle away. The kids cheer like they've won a war. You smile. Aztec pest control in action. Once you reach your own plot, you tie off the canoe with a loop of reed rope and step back onto your chinampa. Everything is heavy with morning moisture. The squash blossoms are closed for now, like sleepy trumpets. The tomatoes glisten. Even the soil feels like it's still dreaming. You get to work in silence, starting with the beans, gently pulling a few tendrils away from the corn stalks. The beans always try to overachieve. If you don't keep them in check, they'll strangle everything. You mutter at them like misbehaving pets. Stay in your lane. You hear a soft splash behind you. Probably a frog. Or, more alarmingly, one of those giant canal fish that you swear has been following your canoe all week. You're convinced it has a grudge. You choose to ignore it. Today's harvest won't be huge, but it's decent. Tomatoes, beans, amaranth, leaves, a few chili peppers, and some flowers for the market, some kittle, the gold standard. You bundle them up with a reed tie and place them in your canoe, all neat and carefully arranged. Presentation matters. The more symmetrical your bundle, the more likely someone at the market will nod approvingly and hand over a bag of salt. There's a strange piece to this routine. You've done it so many times, your body moves on autopilot. You stop thinking. You just feel mud under your nails, the cool breeze off the water, the squelch of your sandals on the wet chinampa. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. It's alive. Still, you fantasize sometimes about sleeping in. about someone inventing a magical plant that harvests itself and rows you to market while humming a tune. But then the sun breaks over the eastern horizon, washing the whole lake in gold, and you remember why you love this. It's quiet, it's beautiful, and it's yours. You paddle toward the market now, your basket resting between your knees. The water is glassy, reflecting the color of the sky like a dream. Other canoes join the gentle flotilla. A woman carries a stack of tortillas wrapped in cloth. A young man has nothing but flowers. Someone's bringing live frogs in a basket. You can hear them, loudly protesting their fate. Historians still argue whether Chinampa life was peaceful or brutally demanding. Probably both. You think of it like this: the lake gives, but it doesn't pamper. You're not going to be rich out here, but you won't go hungry either unless you forget to weed for a week. At the canalside market, the smell of breakfast hits. First corn masa, cooking over flat stones, and some kind of fish stew bubbling. You dock your canoe, hop out, and join the line of sleepy vendors setting up. You stake out a spot, lay your reed mat, and begin arranging your goods. A customer wanders by, points at your marigolds, and raises an eyebrow. You nod, offer a chili as a bonus. She nods back. A deal is made. No paperwork, just eye contact and confidence. Soon, you're trading with a vendor who has smoked fish. Then someone offers eggs for tomatoes. Then you spot a guy selling hot atole. And remember, you haven't eaten. You trade a small bundle of herbs and score a steaming gourd of breakfast. It tastes like corn and dreams and slightly too much cinnamon. Perfection. The market hums around you now. Canoes still arrive, children dart between baskets, and somewhere a musician plays a hollow flute, probably just to annoy people. But the tune is soft, slow, and kind of catchy. Eventually, you pack up, satisfied. Your canoe is a little lighter. Your pouch has salt, eggs, and what might be a duck feather of unknown origin. You paddle home, the sun higher now, the water shimmering. With life as you pull up to your Chinampa, you glance at your garden again. It looks ... right, not perfect, but full, and quiet, and floating. You yawn. Canoe o'clock is over. Nap o'clock is dangerously close. You return home with the morning's trades tucked under one arm and a soft layer of satisfaction sticking to your skin like mist. Your Chinampa welcomes you back the way it always does, quietly, with the faint rustle of cornstalks and the occasional splash of something mysterious in the water that you're still choosing not to investigate. You unload your canoe and glance up at the sun. It's climbing now, stretching long fingers of light across the water, making everything shimmer. Time for a break? Not quite. There's something sacred to do first. You kneel near the edge of your Chinampa, where a small clearing has been left bare intentionally. This is your offering patch. You place a few kernels of maize on a leaf, gently fold it, and leave it facing east. For Tlaloc, the rain god, or maybe for Chicomecotel, goddess of agriculture, honestly, you hedge your bets. Lake gods have long memories and short tempers. The Aztecs didn't separate farming from worship. Every step you take here, every handful of mud, every seed, it all brushes up against the divine. That corn you picked earlier, sacred, the marigold. Petals, definitely sacred. Even the weeds, under the right moon phase and the right priest, might have holy aspirations. You sit back and listen. The lake has gone still again. You'd swear it's watching. You think about the old stories, the ones your grandfather told, the ones where the gods created humans from corn dough, or where they flooded the world out of boredom or spite, depending on the translation. The Aztecs believed they lived in the fifth sun, the fifth attempt by the gods to get creation right. The previous four, all wiped out. Earthquakes, jaguars, fire, rain, the usual celestial cleanup. And you're just hoping this sun lasts long. Enough for your chilies to ripen. As the sky brightens, you see the temple pyramids of Tenochtitlan faint in the distance. You imagine the priests already preparing for today's rituals, perhaps a maize ceremony, or something more elaborate involving dancers, feathers, and let's be honest, probably a little blood. The Chinampa life may feel serene, but it's tethered to a religion that never quite sleeps. You remember attending one of the night feasts not long ago. The moon had been high, the lake like obsidian, and the air thick with incense and roasted corn. You arrived by canoe, of course. Everyone did. There were dozens of red boats, bumping softly against the docks like a chorus of snoring animals. The plaza near the water's edge glowed with torchlight. You joined the others, not saying much. Talking wasn't really the point. There was a kind of hush over everyone, like the gods were eavesdropping. A priest in robes covered with corn husks stepped forward, hands lifted skyward. He chanted in a voice that sounded like dry leaves rubbing together, and you felt every hair on your arm stand up. In the center of the ritual circle stood a mound of maize, stacked like gold bricks. A child placed marigold petals on top. No one clapped. There was no applause, just silence, and the sound of the lake breathing that night. You ate tamales soaked in chili sauce, so spicy your vision blurred. You drank pulque from a gourd, thick and sour and mildly alarming. And you watched dancers in jaguar masks stomp in rhythm to a beat that seemed older than time. A scholar once told you the Aztecs believed performance was prayer. Every movement a request, every drumbeat a demand. You felt it back in the present. You sip your lukewarm atole and try to remember that feeling. It's not hard, everything. Hear this soil, these plants, the ducks that absolutely will not stop pooping on your squash. All of it feels like part of something larger. Farming isn't just farming. It's a quiet bargain with the gods. I'll grow it, you water it, deal. You adjust one of the corn stalks that's leaning too far and prop it up with a stick. Your hands are stained brown. Your knees are covered in dirt. You look around and realize the Chinampa looks better than it did even a few days ago. Fuller. Happier, if that's possible, for a raft of vegetables. Still, not everything grows the way you want. You check your little row of herbs near the edge, basil, epazote, maybe some experimental mint, and notice something's been nibbling. Probably the same beetles that your neighbor claims are the reincarnated spirits of lazy gardeners. You make a mental note to burn more chili smoke tonight, just in case. A canoe glides past. A young couple, both holding baskets, humming softly. You wave, they wave back. No one says anything. Words are like seeds here, you plant them carefully. Too many, and you just get weeds. You pause, squinting up at the sun again. Midday's coming. The lake starts to shimmer with heat. Time slows down. Even the frogs go quiet. This is when everything softens, the plants droop a little, the water stills, the air thickens. You sit in the shade of your reed hut, staring out at the other Chinampas. They float there silently, neat little rectangles of life. It's easy to forget how unnatural this all is. Land that doesn't belong here, tethered to a lake, like boats that forgot how to drift. And yet, this unnatural system has become the Most natural thing you know. You lie back for a moment, the smell of earth and smoke clinging to your clothes. Your eyelids drop, just for a second, just until the next breeze. The lake waits, patient, and the gods, probably amused, watch from the sky. You wake up to the sound of ducks arguing, loudly. One honks, another quacks back like it's being personally insulted, and a third just flaps its wings and stomps across your squash vines like it owns the place. You sit up groggily and immediately regret falling asleep in the shade. Your back feels like it's been folded by a tortilla press. The sun is higher now, though not quite at its most blistering. This part of the day is what Chinampa farmers call the hush. Not because it's quiet, it's not, but because everything slows. The birds perch in lazy clumps, the plants stop growing like they've taken a lunch break, and even the wind seems to shrug and go take a nap. But not you. You've got some maintenance to do. You grab your reed shovel, more like a flattened basket on a stick, and head for the edges of your Chinampa. This is where things start to fray if you're not careful. Mud settles unevenly, reeds shift, little. Leaks sneak in. You press your foot against one corner and feel it sag slightly, not enough to panic, but enough to frown. Chinampas require constant care. They're not permanent the way land is permanent. They're more like living creatures, buoyant, squishy creatures that demand love, sweat, and occasionally your last nerve. You scoop up fresh canal sludge and begin patching the edge. Thick layers padded down like icing. A very ugly cake that might try to float away if you look away too long. As you work, your mind drifts to stories, one of them about a noble who had too many Chinampas to manage. Instead of tending them himself, he assigned stewards. But the gods, apparently unimpressed with his delegation skills, sent a sudden storm that unmoored the plots and sent his crops floating away like soggy parade floats. Historians still argue whether this story is true or just a farmer's version of "don't get cocky." Either way, your hands don't stop moving. Once you've stabilized that corner, you move on to water management. You squat beside your canal, eyes narrowing at the current, too slow. You grab your reed rake and dredge the narrow channel, pulling out clumps of lakeweed, stray twigs, and what may or may not be an old sandal. The water begins to trickle more freely. Chinampas aren't isolated islands, they're part of a network. Water must move between them, lazily but predictably. The canals are veins. The lake is the heart. If the blood doesn't flow, the whole body suffers. You learned that the hard way during your first season, when a backed-up canal flooded your neighbor's bean crop. He didn't yell, he just stared at you, disappointed. Which was worse? You sit on your haunches and watch the water swirl. A dragonfly hovers over it like a tiny helicopter, then zips away. A soft splash, and a turtle surfaces near the edge, blinks at you, and slides back down without comment. That's the lake's way, give you a little mystery, then take it right. Back, you stand and stretch, back creaking like dry reeds. The heat is creeping in now, making everything feel slow. You walk toward your little compost mound near the back of the Chinampa and stir it with a stick. It's doing well, dark, steamy, full of potential. Smells awful, a good sign. The Aztecs understood decomposition better than many modern gardeners. They knew what to pile: fish guts, lake plants, maize husks, and in what order. They knew when to stir, when to leave it be, and when to apologize to the gods for the smell. You sprinkle in a few fresh scraps and cover it with a mat of old reeds to keep out the birds. Speaking of birds, A heron lands nearby with that awkward, dinosaur-like grace only herons have. It eyes your plot suspiciously, then begins pecking at something near the edge. Probably a worm, maybe a god in disguise. With Aztec mythology, you never really know. You hear the squawk of children laughing across the water. They're jumping between chinampas, daring each other to leap farther and splash bigger. You shake your head and smile. You did the same thing once, until you missed a landing and spent the rest of the afternoon covered in duckweed and shame. Your neighbor Rose passed slowly. He's got a cargo of reeds bundled at the front of his canoe, probably to reinforce his own plot. You wave, he waves back. Then he points at your chinampa edge and yells, "Your corner's sinking again." You glare and yell, "It's breathing." A running joke. Sort of. You decide to take a quick round of your garden before the real heat sets in. The tomatoes are thriving. The beans are getting clingy again. The squash blossoms are closed up, hiding from the sun. You check your chili plants. One of them is starting to turn purple. You didn't plan that, but it looks cool, like nature's weird mood ring. You harvest a few more herbs, some basil, a pinch of mint, a couple of amaranth leaves. You'll add them to tonight's meal, maybe trade a handful for tamales, if your neighbor's sister is cooking again. Her tamales have a reputation: soft, spicy, and possibly laced with sorcery. The heat crests, the air thickens. Even the frogs retreat into shadows. You retreat to ducking back into your reed hut. It's not big, barely fits you and a jug of water, but it's home. It smells like smoke, damp earth, and the faint musk of herbs drying from the ceiling. You lie back and close your eyes. Outside, the lake laps gently against your plot. The ducks have gone quiet. The children are done splashing. Everything feels still, suspended, like a breath held just a moment longer than usual. You smile to yourself, half dash asleep. Just another quiet day on your floating farm. The heat breaks with the wind. Not a strong wind, just enough to rustle the top layer of the corn stalks and carry the smell of nearby roasting corn across the lake. You stretch out of your reed hut, joints cracking like dry twigs, and squint at the sky. Still bright, but softening. That late afternoon glow is starting to spread, warm and golden, wrapping the chinampas in a slow exhale. It's your favorite time of day. You've got chores to finish, of course, you always do. But you can afford to move slower now, with the sun descending and the air finally remembering how to be breathable. You grab your reed basket, mostly empty now, and walk the length of your chinampa, checking everything as you go. The corn stalks sway like they're gossiping. The beans twine tighter, their little curly fingers grabbing whatever they can reach. You remember planting these seeds weeks ago, pressing them into the soil with your thumb, muttering a half-joke prayer. Please grow. I'm too tired to start over. And look at them now. Tall, green, dramatic. Like they knew you were bluffing. You reach the edge of your plot and peer over into the canal. The water's darker now, shadows rippling across the surface. You see your reflection smeared with dirt, hair a disaster, shirt damp from sweat. You look like a wild reed creature. You also look proud. As you're admiring your very muddy aesthetic, something moves in the water. A ripple, then a flash of silver, a fish. Probably, but your imagination perks up. Maybe it's one of the lake spirits. The ones the old stories whisper about, the beings that live between the roots of the willows. Watching, listening, waiting. The Aztecs told stories of arwotes, the willows you use to anchor chinampas, as guardians. The trees were said to be sacred intermediaries between earth and lake and sky. Some believed they could hear prayers or threats. One myth describes a willow that bent to shelter a farmer from a lightning strike. Another tells of one that creaked and groaned before a plot collapsed, like it was warning its owner. You place your hand on one of your willows. The bark is rough, peeling slightly, but cool. You whisper, still holding, and feel only silence in return, which is probably a good thing. There's a small canal fork nearby you've been meaning to clear out, and with daylight fading, now's a good time. You grab your reed rake and paddle your canoe over to it. The passage is choked with lake plants, floating vines, water lettuce, and the ever-present, ever-rowing duckweed. You start scooping, tossing heaps of green sludge into the canoe like you're foraging for salad no one wants. The work is rhythmic. Splash, scoop, sigh. The smell is not great. Somewhere between damp lettuce and forgotten spinach in the fridge. But you've grown to appreciate it. It smells like fertility, like things breaking down to feed other things. You hum to yourself the same old song you always do when you rake. You don't know the words. Probably no one does anymore. There's a piece of carved stone caught between the reeds. You pry it loose and examine it. It looks like part of a statue, an old one, maybe from a temple long swallowed by the lake. A nose and part of a mouth. The stone is smooth, worn by water. You stare at it for a moment. Is it a relic? Trash? Sin? Historians still argue whether Chinampa regions were built purely for agriculture, or if some sections were ritual sites first, then reclaimed for planting. Maybe you're digging in what used to be someone's shrine. You whisper a quick, "No offense to the stone, just in case." You place it back in the canoe. Maybe it'll end up on your altar, or in your compost. Either way, the gods will get a kick out of it. Back at your Chinampa, the light is turning syrupy. Everything's gold and copper and dreamlike. You decide to gather some flowers before it gets dark. You pick marigolds carefully, watching as their petals leave streaks of yellow-orange pollen on your fingers. You'll use some for the altar, some for trade, and some just to tuck behind your ear, because why not? Fashion waits for no one. As you walk back, you see a boat approaching. A wide, flat canoe carrying bundles of reeds, and on top, a dog. As the light squintly, the Aztec hairless dog, looking both regal and perpetually cold. It stands at the bow like a tiny, shivering god, surveying the Chinampas like it owns every floating inch. The man paddling waves. He's scouting for fish. He calls, you nod. Good luck. I think mine all left after my last song. The dog barks once, as if confirming your musical crimes, and the canoe drifts past. You settle on the edge of your plot, watching the water darken. Shadows grow long. Birds begin calling short, shrill chirps, like they're wrapping up their business for the day. Somewhere across the water, a drumbeat starts, faint, distant, a reminder that the city never really sleeps. You light a small fire in your reed hut, just enough to warm your atole and smoke the mosquitoes away. You sip slowly, knees drawn up to your chest, staring into the flames. The taste is familiar, sweet, thick, grounding, like drinking the past. You think about how many hands came before yours, how many generations bent over Chinampas, scooping mud, planting seeds, whispering to trees, cursing ducks. This isn't just farming, it's inheritance. Every gesture you make here echoes someone else's from centuries ago. You lie back again, this time with a blanket over your shoulders. The sky fades from bronze to deep blue. A A few stars blink awake. The lake goes still, like it's listening. You let out a long breath. Another day afloat. Another garden fed. Another story folded into the soft mud. Night arrives slowly on the chinampas, like a blanket pulled gently across the sky. One moment you're watching the last shimmer of orange on the water, and the next, the stars are yawning open above you. You lie back on your reed mat, arms folded. Behind your head, staring up as the constellations slide into place, your ceiling tonight is a bowl of quiet light. The air cools fast now. You can hear the change. The crickets begin their steady rhythm. The frogs croak in lazy half-sentences. And somewhere in the dark, an owl flaps silently from tree to tree. You pull your blanket tighter and close your eyes for a moment, but of course, sleep doesn't come just yet. Out here, nighttime means listening. There's no city hum to blur the edges. Every splash, every whisper of water against mud, every creak of the willows feels personal. The lake doesn't sleep. It sighs, it murmurs, it remembers. Some say this is the hour when the Tizimim, the star demons, stalk the skies. The Aztecs feared them, especially during eclipses, when they believed the world might end if the gods weren't properly fed. You peek up at the stars again. They seem peaceful tonight. No one's falling. Yet still, you reach for your little pouch of obsidian shards kept near your sleeping mat. Not because you think monsters are coming, but because your grandmother always said, protection is preparation, not paranoia. Then she made you keep 3 chili peppers under your pillow too, just in case. You don't anymore. You tried that once. Never again. A breeze tickles the reeds, and you sit up, alert. Just wind, but it brings something with it, a sound, faint and rhythmic, like a drum. Not the kind from the temples in Tenochtitlan. This is softer, almost like a heartbeat. You rise, curious, and step to the edge of your chinampa. The water reflects only darkness now. Your torch burns low behind you, casting your silhouette long and flickering across the soil. Then, in the far distance, you see it. Another canoe, gliding silently between the plots, its passenger hooded and still. You watch. No paddling, just drifting. You blink, gone. You tell yourself it was a trick of the light. Or maybe just another farmer, paddling late. Still, the stories come back. About the Ahasotl, the lake creature with a hand at the end of its tail, said to drag the unwary beneath the water. Supposedly, it only took the clever or the prideful. You glance at your harvest baskets. Decent, yes, but hardly hubris-worthy. You turn away, smirking to yourself. The lake's been telling ghost stories longer than you've been alive. Let it whisper. You're still here. Still. Maybe tonight's not the night to wander too far from the fire. You return to your reed mat, adding a few sticks to the small flame. It crackles in agreement. You sit beside it and take out your little packet of smoked beans, your dinner tonight. Not fancy, but warm. You chew slowly, thoughtfully, watching the shadows shift across the lake. More fires blink on, dotting the chinampa fields like sleepy stars fallen to earth. A couple of voices call to each other, neighbors checking in. You call back, a short, all's well. It's the kind of simple exchange that keeps the darkness at bay. Tonight, you decide, is for remembering. You reach into a pouch and pull out a small stone idol, your talisman. It's shaped like Tlaloc, with his unmistakable goggle eyes and fanged mouth. Crude, worn smooth by years of handling. You turn it over in your palm and murmur thanks. Not just for rain or fertility, for silence, for safety, for another day afloat. There's a quiet dignity in these rituals. No one sees them. No temple priests watch. You do it for you, for your chinampa, for the plants that trust you not to drown them. You tuck the idol back into its pouch and settle in again. The air smells of wet earth and cooling ash. Somewhere nearby, a duck splashes indignantly, probably a heron encroaching on its bedtime territory. You chuckle softly and close your eyes. Your mind drifts not towards sleep, exactly, but into that fuzzy space where time stops marching and starts meandering. You remember the first time you stood on a chinampa, terrified it would sink, how it wobbled underfoot, how the soil squished between your toes. You remember planting your first maize seed, watching it sprout, amazed that something could grow in a pile of mud and sticks. You think about the elders, the ones who taught you which plants go where, which flowers attract butterflies, which days are good for planting and which are cursed. Some of them are gone now, but their voices live in your hands, your habits, your jokes about haunted cucumbers. You hear a splash again, this one close. You sit up fast, heart thudding, but it's only a turtle blinking at you from a floating log, like it's mildly annoyed. You disturbed its commute. You exhale, slow and deliberate, and lie back down. The stars overhead twinkle like old friends. The moon is a soft white grin in the sky. Your fire crackles, its final few pops before dying down to embers. You pull the blanket tight around your shoulders and breathe deep. The lake will keep watch tonight, and the chinampa, your quiet raft of earth and effort, will carry you gently through the darkness. You wake before dawn again, but this time it's not the ducks or frogs or even that ghostly canoe from last night. It's the smell. The air is thick with the aroma of fresh earth and something else smoke. Not the ordinary, comforting kind from a breakfast fire or chilly fumigation. This is sharper, almost sour, tinged with a trace of panic. You sit up fast and scan the horizon. In the distance, across the water, a faint column of dark smoke is rising behind the chinampas, curling into the sky like a warning finger. You fumble into your sandals and rush to your canoe, eyes fixed on the smoke. As you paddle toward it, other boats converge. Neighbors, sleepy and anxious, blinking into the half-light. Some are muttering prayers under their breath. Others say nothing at all. As you get closer, the scene becomes clear. One of the outer chinampas has caught fire. Not a roaring blaze, but enough to blacken a chunk of crops and char the delicate willows at the edge. Someone's torch may be left too close to a reed hut, or maybe a cooking fire gone wild. Either way, the damage is real. You and the others jump to help. Buckets, water jugs, even hands scooping canal water, whatever works. You slap water over the edges, pat down singed soil, and tear away burning reeds. Smoke clings to your skin, makes your eyes sting, but slowly the fire is tamed. When it's over, the owner stands silent, staring at the wreck. A woman, young, maybe your age, her hands tremble as she brushes ash from a surviving cornstalk. She doesn't cry, but her shoulders sag in a way that says plenty. You step forward, place a handful of chili peppers and a few beans in her basket. Another neighbor adds amaranth. Someone else hands her a reed bundle. No words, just gestures, just solidarity. That's how things are done here. One chinampa fails, the others help it float again. On the paddle back to your own plot, you watch the sky change. The sun begins to rise, splashing pale gold over the lake. The smoke fades, chased away by light, but the smell lingers. It always does. You sit on the edge of your chinampa and think about the risks. Not just fire, rot, pests, flooding, drought. You're floating in a balance so delicate it borders on magic. Every plant you harvest, every willow you trim, every canal you dredge, each one is a vote for survival. And sometimes it's not enough. Still, the Aztecs believed in resilience. In cycles, death feeds life, and life grows out of the ashes. It's why they buried offerings in their fields, fragments of bone, bits of jade, even small figurines, not just for the gods, but to remind the soil what it's supposed to do, transform. You kneel and press your fingers into the dirt. It's still warm from the sun, still pulsing with possibility. You whisper, "Don't betray me," and hope the lake gods are listening. Later that morning, you row to the northern edge of the Chinyampa district, where the builders work. Not farmers, engineers, in their own earthy way. They're reinforcing a new plot, and you want to learn. You tie off your canoe and join the effort. The air here smells different, more of clay, cut reeds, and sweat. The foundation is being laid. Thick bundles of reed stalks, layered with mud dredged from the canal, all anchored to a willow framework. You ask questions. How wide should the base be? How deep should the mud go? One old man chuckles and says, "Deep enough to make the ancestors comfortable." He shows you a trick, twisting the base reeds into knots so the mud clings tighter. Another woman teaches you how to drive sharpened branches into the lake bed to stop the whole thing from drifting away. It's a mix of instinct, science, and stubbornness. Historians still debate whether this Chinampa engineering was developed over decades of experimentation or inherited wholesale from earlier lake peoples. Either way, it works, it floats, and that's enough. You stay longer than planned, helping haul mud, slapping mosquitoes, laughing when someone trips and lands face first in a reed pile. They emerge grumbling but unhurt, crowned with water lettuce. Someone offers them a flower as a consolation prize. When you finally return home, your arms are sore, your back is stiff, and your Chinampa greets you like an old friend, solid, quiet, waiting. You check your plants. They're fine, more than fine. The tomatoes are fat. The beans are winding around the corn like content snakes. A few marigolds have popped open since this morning, bright and gold like tiny suns. You smile and pull out your digging stick. Time to expand a little. Not much, just a few more rows near the edge. You press the stick into the soil, lean into it, and begin turning over the earth. The first scoop reveals a small shard of pottery. Blue paint still clings to the surface, faded but beautiful. You hold it up, squint at the swirling design. A flower, maybe, or a sun. You turn it over and feel the warmth of the soil still clinging to it. You place it carefully on a flat rock near your reed hut. Not for trade, not for study, just for company. That night, you light another small fire and sit beside it. The lake is calm again. The stars peek down like curious onlookers. You hear laughter across the water, soft, tired, real. Somewhere, someone plays a flute. Probably badly, but it still sounds perfect. You sip your atoli, let the warmth fill your belly, and glance at the piece of pottery glowing in the firelight. You whisper, "Still floating," and lean back against the hut, and the lake, in its way, seems to whisper back. You wake to the sound of rain. Not a storm, just a soft, steady drizzle that taps on your reed roof like a lazy drummer. You blink in the grey light, wrap your blanket tighter, and listen. Rain on the chinampas is a strange thing. It doesn't splash or bounce. It sinks. It soaks into everything: soil, wood, skin, memory. You rise slowly and peek outside. The lake is misted over, thin fog curling off the surface like breath. Your plants are slick and shining. The corn leaves are bowed like monks mid-prayer, their edges lined with trembling beads of water. The willows drip in silence. You walk barefoot through the wet, letting the mud squish between your toes. Your chinampa feels heavier, grounded, as though it's absorbing not just the water, but something deeper. This isn't just a weather change. This is a shift. The rain turns everything quiet. Voices travel farther. Sounds seem rounder. You can hear the creak of someone's paddle across the canal, distant but clear. Someone singing, too low and sweet, probably to their maize. You don't know the words, but the tune tugs at something old inside you. You hum along. Rain days on the chinampa are strange. You don't have to water anything, nature handles that. But you can't be still either. There's too much to guard against, too much to notice. You begin your walk around, checking the high-risk spots. The new edge you patched after the fire, still holding. You nod to yourself. One win. You check your compost, it's steaming like a happy volcano. 2 wins. The tomatoes, however, look slightly overwhelmed, their stems bent from the weight of water. You gently shake them free, murmuring apologies. Nearby, a canal is rising faster than usual. You kneel beside it, eyes sharp. The water's lapping close to the walkway you use to reach your neighbor's chinampa. Another inch and it'll spill. You grab your rake and begin dredging the drainage ditch, scooping out mud and reeds to let the water escape faster. Chinampas are resilient, but they have their limits. Too much rain, and they start to rot from the inside. Roots drown, paths vanish, and worst of all, the boundaries blur. What was once a neat rectangle of earth can dissolve into a muddy smear if you don't act fast enough. You remember the stories. A season, years ago, when the rains didn't stop for a month. Chinampas floated free. Crops vanished. Entire families had to move inland, abandoning their gardens to the will of the lake. Some came back, some didn't. The gods, people said, were in a mood that year. Historians still argue whether those floods were natural cycles, or signs of early environmental mismanagement to many plots. Too much pressure, not enough drainage. Either way, the lesson stuck. Don't get lazy when the skies are generous. The lake loves to give, but it loves to take. To dot as you work, your neighbor rows past, covered in a soaked poncho made from stitched agave fiber. He raises an eyebrow. Digging canals again. You shrugged. Trying not to float to Tlaxcala. He laughs. If you do, bring back their tortillas. You grin and keep digging. The water drops a little. Good. You feel the chinampa breathe a bit easier. By mid-morning, the rain slows to a mist. You take a break under your hut, sipping from a warm gourd of sweetened maize drink. The smell of wet earth is stronger now, almost spicy. It clings to your hands, your clothes, your tongue. You like it. You reach for your small weather marker, a flat stone with carved symbols. Each symbol marks a past weather event. A sun for a drought, a jagged swirl for wind, 3 dots for heavy rain. You add another dot with the tip of a charcoal stick, a quiet ritual. No one taught you to do this. You just started one day, and now it feels necessary. Later, when the mist clears a bit, You visit your elder, the keeper of a larger, older chinampa, not far from yours. His plot is legendary, not because it's big, but because it's weird. The paths twist, the crops grow in rings. The whole thing feels like a puzzle. You find him crouched near a circle of basil plants, rearranging small stones. "You finally came," he says, not looking up. You raise an eyebrow. "I was waiting for a rain invitation." He chuckles, then gestures for you to sit. "You want to learn something strange?" "Always." He explains that some farmers, a long time ago, used planting circles instead of rows, not just for beauty, for energy. They believed circular patterns made the gods pay attention, or maybe confused pests. No one knows. But his basil never has worms. That's enough proof for him. He shows you his planting diagram, a spiral drawn in mud, with tiny seed placements marked by charcoal dots. It looks like a riddle, or a prayer, or both. You copy it down in your notebook, unsure if it's science or magic. But you've learned not to dismiss either too quickly. Before you leave, he hands you a small gourd of fermented squash drink. It smells challenging. You drink it anyway. It tastes like rain and root vegetables and possibly regret. But it warms your belly. Back home, you begin sketching plans. Maybe one of your side plots could become a circle, just to try. You gather seeds, trace a spiral into the soft soil, and place your first bean at the center. As you press it into the earth, you whisper, "Let's confuse the gods together." And maybe they'll laugh. Or maybe they'll help. Either way, the rain has passed. The lake settles. The chinampa holds. You sit back, muddy and smiling, under a sky that's no longer grey but soft and open, and everything feels exactly as it should. The next day, the sun returns like it forgot it had an appointment. Not just soft and golden, this time it's bold. High, glaring. The kind of sun that makes sweat break out before breakfast and turns every shadow into a refuge. You wake early, again, but now it's not the ducks or the rain that stir you. It's the heat already beginning to press down on your reed roof. Like the sky has gotten a little too close. You splash water on your face from a clay jug and step outside, squinting. The chinampa is steaming slightly, dew from the rain now evaporating in gentle tendrils. Everything smells rich, loamy, and weirdly floral. That's what a storm leaves behind, damp soil and fresh starts. You set out early for the nearby flower plots. Today is market prep. Now, you don't grow just food. That would be too easy. You also grow beauty. Marigolds, dahlias, cosmos, even the occasional shock of sunflowers that tower over your hut like sentinels with pollen-stained armor. The Aztecs adored flowers, not just for decoration, but for ritual, meaning, barter. They were woven into clothes, braided into hair, and laid at the feet of statues that probably didn't smell great otherwise. You pick carefully. Not too many, just enough for bundles that say, "I care, but not I tried too hard." Each flower you snip is examined for symmetry, brightness, and general attitude. You pause at one wilted marigold and decide to give it a pep talk instead of cutting it. You pile your blooms into a woven basket, sprinkle a little water over them to keep them fresh, and place a cloth over the top. Then you move on to your food harvest. Tomatoes, herbs, a few squash blossoms, some surprisingly cooperative chili peppers. It's a good mix. You add a few ears of maize for trade, not your best, but they've got character. As you load the canoe, you remember the first market you ever paddled to. You were nervous. Of course, your hands smelled like compost. Your flowers had wilted slightly in the heat, and your neighbor told you your tomatoes looked philosophical, which didn't sound like a compliment. You sold half your basket. You bartered the rest for tamales, a tiny flute, and some advice you didn't ask for. Since then, you've gotten better. You've learned how to tie your bundles just right. How to smile like you're not secretly evaluating someone else's squash, and how to eavesdrop politely. Because markets aren't just about goods. They're about information, gossip, weather forecasts, spiritual rumors, new planting tricks. One time you learned that mixing chili ash with bean roots helps keep weevils away. Another time, someone swore a frog jumped out of their compost and said thank you. You're still not sure if they were joking. The paddle to the market is smooth. The lake is calm today. Only the soft sound of your oar slicing through it like a slow lullaby. Other canoes are headed the same way, some carrying flowers, others full of maize, or dried fish, or mats of woven reeds. You nod at a few familiar faces. Everyone's got that same expression, hopeful, slightly sunburnt, and calculating what their basil might be worth. The market is set up on the edge of a larger chinampa, flattened and cleared for trade. It's buzzing already, color everywhere. Brightly dyed cloth hangs between reed poles. Baskets overflow with beans, peppers, cacao pods. A few performers beat small drums and chant praise songs. A child runs past, trailing a string tied to an imaginary jaguar. You set up near the edge, arrange your flowers in loose spirals, and stack your produce in neat piles. Then you wait. Your first customer is an elder with a voice like gravel. She inspects your marigolds, sniffs them, nods approvingly, and trades you 3 of her tamales, chili and squash blossom, the good kind. You tuck them into your pack like their treasure. The next is a man selling obsidian blades. He wants basil. You ask what for. He says it's for his partner's stew. You trade a small bundle and throw in a flower. He pretends not to smile. By midday, the sun is directly overhead, and the market slows. Everyone's shade hopping. You hide under a reed awning and share a tamale with a vendor next to you, who's trading hand-carved whistles shaped like frogs. He tells you the frogs actually work better when it rains. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. That's just their mood. You talk about planting circles. He says his cousin tried one and grew a squash the size of a sleeping dog. You both agree. That's either a blessing or a threat. You trade a flower bundle for a whistle. It croaks on the first try. Excellent. Before you leave, you stop by the seed swap. This is your favorite part. Dozens of farmers exchanging tiny envelopes and clay jars filled with possibility. You bring out your latest finds, a few purple chili, seeds, a small bag of amaranth grains, and a single mysterious bean someone gave you last moon. You trade for a variety of greens you've never grown before, and a handful of flowers that look like stars when they bloom. You load up your canoe, lighter than before, but somehow fuller. The paddle home is slower, not because you're tired, though you are, but because this is the part you don't rush. The lake glows now, soft and golden, mirroring the sky in ripples. You trail your fingers through the water as you go, leaving a wake that sparkles. When you arrive, your chinampa greets you in silence. The plants look a little taller than before, like they missed you. You unpack your goods and sit for a moment on the dock, chewing the last bite of tamale and watching the sun begin its slow descent. Markets remind you that you're not alone. Out here, surrounded by water and plants, it's easy to forget. But every canoe you passed, every joke you heard, every trade made, they stitch the floating world together. Tomorrow, you'll plant those new seeds. Tonight, you sit in the fading light, flute in hand, wondering if the frogs will sing along. The frogs do sing, not just one or two. Either an entire chorus begins just after nightfall, echoing from every canal, nook, and muddy bank like a squelchy orchestra warming up. You sit by the water with your frog whistle in hand, playing a few soft notes. At first, they pause, then respond. It's unclear whether they're amused or offended. Either way, it feels like a conversation. The stars are brilliant tonight. The lake is so still, you can see constellations perfectly reflected like the sky is floating, too. You lie on your back on the edge of your chinampa, arms behind your head, and listen to the sounds of a world that doesn't care whether you're watching. A dragonfly lands on your knee. You try not to move. It tilts its tiny alien head at you, buzzes its wings, and zips off again. That's the kind of visitor you get out here, things that land, pause, and vanish, as you begin to drift off. Lulled by the chirps and croaks and lapping. Water, a thought interrupts you. You never planted those new seeds. You groan softly, stand up, and grab your seed pouch. The moonlight is just bright enough to see by. You choose the empty plot near the back of your chinampa, the one you've been saving for something different. You kneel and begin pressing the seeds gently into the soil, one at a time, a rhythm, push, cover, push, cover. It's meditative, maybe even sacred. You whisper to them, not words exactly, but something that feels like encouragement or apology. This, after all, is what chinampa life is built on, repetition and faith. You plant because something inside you insists it will grow, even when it rains too long, even when it doesn't rain at all, even when a goat swims across your canal and eats your best squash like it's a buffet. That happened once. The goat's name was Benito. You're still not over it. When you finish planting, you dust your hands on your shirt and sit back. You watch the soil like something might sprout instantly if you're patient enough. Of course it doesn't, but you feel better anyway. The next morning arrives, warm and windless. You wake to the smell of damp earth and the sound of someone hammering in the distance, probably reinforcing a dock post before the next storm. You stretch, yawn, and begin your morning rounds. Today is for balance, not work heavy, not idle. You water the crops that didn't get enough from the rain. You trim the edges of your plot. You check the willows for signs of rot or pests. One of them has a beetle party going on under the bark. You evict them gently using a stick and some whispered threats. As you crouch near the waterline, a canoe approaches slowly. A visitor, it's your aunt. She doesn't come often, but when she does, it usually means one of three things. She's bringing fermented drinks. She wants help bartering for something expensive, or she's got news. This time, it's news. She ties her canoe to your dock and hands you a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, cacao beans, dried hibiscus, and a strip of agave fiber with something inked onto it. You unroll it. It's an invitation to a festival in the southern Chinampa district. You blink. A festival. For what? She grins. A blessing of the fields and a marriage. One of the flower farmers. You'll like it. There'll be music. You stare at the note again. It's drawn in bright red ink, with stylized corn stalks curling around the border. Fancy. You've never been to a Chinampa wedding. You nod. I'll come. She beams and pulls out a second bundle, fruit tamales, and fermented pineapple drink. Good, she says. You'll need energy. That afternoon, you prepare. You bundle up herbs and flowers as gifts. You tidy your canoe. You consider washing your clothes. Then remember you have exactly one decent tunic anyway. You brush off the worst of the dirt and hope for the best. The paddle south is long but pleasant. The lake is more crowded here, dozens of chinampas clustered. Like puzzle pieces, each one distinct. Some have colored flags, others flower arches. The scent of marigold and chili hangs in the air like a welcome mat. As you arrive, drums start. Not temple drums, these are smaller, played by laughing children and slightly offbeat elders. Flutes join in. A rattle, a shell horn. It's not polished, but it's joyous. You tie up your canoe and follow the sound. The wedding is in full swing. Two farmers stand beneath an arch of flowers, palms together, smiling like they've grown their own joy. An elder chants blessings. People throw petals. A goose honks at exactly the wrong time, and everyone laughs. You hand over your gift herbs, bundled in maize husk. The bride smiles and whispers, thanks. The groom gives you a gourd of something that tastes suspiciously like spiced mud. But you drink it anyway. You dance awkwardly. You're pretty sure your steps are 2 beats off, but no one cares. Someone hands you a flute. You manage to clear notes, and 3 that sound like distressed birds. Children cheer. You bow, as the sun sets. Floating lanterns are released into the canals. Small flames drifting across the water, casting ripples of gold and orange and shadow. You sit at the edge, knees hugged to your chest, watching the lights move like a lazy constellation. Someone plays a lullaby on a reed pipe. Couples sway. The wind stirs the willows. The chinampas glow, and for a moment you forget the weeds, the beetles, the fire, the rain, even Benito, the squash thief goat. You're just here, floating, alive, enough. The festival lingers in your muscles the next morning. You wake sore from dancing and sore from sleeping on a reed mat too thin for your celebratory hangover. But the ache is a good one, the kind that says you were part of something. Your chinampa is quiet when you return. The kind of quiet that almost feels like it's giving you side-eye, like it's saying, glad you had fun. Now get back to work. You unpack your canoe slowly. The reed flute from the festival clinks against the gourd of leftover tamales you somehow didn't finish. You hang the flute by your hut entrance, a little proud, even if you only ever got 2 notes out of it. Maybe 3, if you count that one sound that startled the ducks. Your plants, as expected, didn't party in your absence. The amaranth looks smug. The marigolds have gone wild and need pruning. One of your tomato plants has flopped over dramatically. Like a fainting noble, you start writing it with soft twine, muttering gentle threats. You fall again, and I'm making salsa. As you work, your mind drifts. You think about the couple from the festival, their hands clasped together, the shared smiles, the way the elder described the land as both womb and table, birth and offering. It stuck with you how everything you grow is meant to nourish someone else, and how that's a kind of love. You pull weeds with more tenderness than usual later. As the sun climbs, you make rounds to your neighbors. Not for gossip, well, not only. You're helping reinforce a nearby plot. One of the willows is sinking, and when a willow goes, the chinampa starts unraveling from the corner in like a forgotten burrito. You tie reeds into long ropes and anchor them around the tree base. Another farmer hauls fresh mud while you patch the exposed roots. Your hands are quickly covered in rich black sludge, warm, dense, oddly satisfying. You smell like the lake, but worse. You don't care. Someone cracks a joke about you becoming a willow yourself. You pose dramatically, arms out like branches, and the others laugh. It's that laughter, the casual, unfiltered kind, that reminds you why these floating gardens work. Not because they're perfect, not because every crop thrives, but because you're all in it together, floating, struggling, laughing, constantly patching, replanting, reshaping. Historians still debate whether Chinampa communities had formal councils or just a complex web of mutual obligation. You're pretty sure it was both. Structure when needed, but more often, favors, glances, shared buckets, and unspoken understandings. You help fix a willow today. Someone helps reroute your canal next week. You give squash. You get chilies. You give advice. You get ignored. It evens out. After the patchwork, you paddle home and take inventory. Your seed stash is low. You make a note to dry out more amaranth stalks and pluck the pods from your climbing beans. You sift through old corn husks, shaking them over a basket to catch any seeds that stuck. You find a gourd tucked under your bench, forgotten, cracked open, but still holding a cluster of maize kernels, deep red, nearly black, glinting like garnets. In the afternoon sun, you run your fingers through them. They're heavier than they look, dense with promise. This strain was a gift, seasons ago, from a traveler passing through. Said it came from a mountain village where the soil sings at dusk. You never found out if he was serious. You decide to plant them next season. Maybe they'll hum that evening. You check the sky. No clouds. The lake stretches out calm and dark, dotted with the glow of other fires across the water. You light your own and sit close. It crackles like it's telling secrets. You slice roasted squash, sprinkle it with salt, and chew slowly. A mosquito buzzes near your ear. You slap it instinctively. Miss, it loops back and hovers. You wave your flute at it like a wand. It disappears. You're not sure if it worked or if the mosquito simply decided you weren't worth the hassle. You take the flute and try again. A breath, a squeak. Then, surprisingly, a clean note. You blink. Play it again. The same sound. Soft, clear. Like a bird trying to say your name. You smile and play another. And another. The melody builds, clumsy, yes, but yours. One note at a time. A small offering to the darkness. You think about the wedding, the laughter, the lights floating across the water. You think about your willow trees, reaching both down and up, holding the world together by threads of root and patience. You think about your floating garden, your tiny kingdom of mud and hope, your patch of persistence in a world always trying to undo itself, and you hum along with the flute, with the frogs, with the lake tomorrow. You'll fix the tomato trellis. You'll reroute the feeder canal. You'll barter for more twine and dry herbs in the sun. But tonight, you're floating, not just on water, but in rhythm, in memory, in the thin space between stars and soil, where the work sleeps for a moment, and the world hushes itself to listen. There's a phrase you hear sometimes among the older farmers, one they mutter when stepping onto their chinampas at first. Light, Teltikpok, Amo, Nechfuya, the earth has not forgotten me. You used to think it was poetic. Now, you're pretty. Sure, it's a dare. This morning, the air is thick. Not hot, not stormy, just full. It's the kind of day where the wind holds its breath, and you feel like something is watching. Not in a scary way, just in that mildly unsettling "this plot is alive and judging me" kind of way. You begin your morning work slowly. Your hands move automatically. Check the chilly plants. Rake the upper edges. Empty the compost bucket into the corner mound. The usual, but your mind is somewhere else. Something's nagging at you. A task unfinished. A question unasked. A gourd misplaced. And then you remember. The spiral garden, you haven't checked on it in days. It's tucked near the far edge, just past the reed wall where the dragonflies gather. It's your experiment, the planting design you copied from the elder. With the weird basil, you push through the brush and stop short. It worked at least. Something did. The spiral isn't just intact, it's thriving. The beans are wrapping around. The pattern like dancers. The herbs are flowering early. And the amaranth at the center has gone tall and dramatic, like it's competing for an award. You crouch and run your fingers along the soil. It's damp, healthy, and faintly warm. You sit for a moment in the middle of it all, letting the spiral wrap around you. A small, silent temple made of chlorophyll and coincidence. This, you realize, is what the Chinampa gives you when you're patient. Not just food, not just trade, but moments like this. Of course, the spell doesn't last. There's a loud splash nearby. You leap to your feet, half expecting to see Benito the goat back from the dead. But no, it's your neighbor's dog, overexcited and under-supervised, chasing ducks into your canal. The ducks protest in a flurry of feathers and honks. You sigh, life returns. You spend the rest of the day like any other muddy, sun-kissed, slightly bitten by insects. You repair a collapsed walkway. Help your neighbor fix their floating compost raft, don't ask. And end up with a barter deal involving dried mushrooms and 3 jokes about singing frogs. As the sun sets, you gather your small harvest. Not a big haul today, but good. Honest. A basket of chilies, a few squash blossoms, a cluster of herbs, and a flower bundle that you tie loosely with reed string. You take the flower bundle to the water's edge and place it gently into the canal. Not as a gift to the gods, not as an offering, just because it's beautiful, and because sometimes the lake deserves a thank you. You return to your reed mat. The sky turns purple, the air cools, the stars come out slowly, one by one, like fireflies waking up late. You play a soft note on your flute. The frogs answer. A breeze stirs the water. Your Chinampa rocks ever so slightly beneath you, reminding you that it is, in fact, a boat pretending to be a garden, and you're still floating, still here, still planting spiral gardens on mud, islands, and daring the earth to forget you, because it won't, because you won't let it. Now, as your eyes grow heavy and the lake grows quiet once more, let the ripples fade into stillness. Let the breeze through the willows become the hush of your breath, soft and slow. Your Chinampa rocks ever so gently beneath you. Not enough to wake you, just enough to remind you that the world is still moving, even when you're not. The stars above have drifted into their places. The frogs hum slower now. The water carries only moonlight. And everything you planted, every seed, every joke, every whispered promise to the soil settles into the earth beneath you. You did your part today. You patched the leaks. You saved the tomatoes. You made the gods laugh, even if you didn't mean to. So now, just rest. Feel the mud still clinging to your hands, the sun still warming your skin from earlier. Hear the last flutter of a duck's wing, the final splash of a canoe far, far away. It's all fading now. The lake, the laughter, the labor. All that remains is this moment. You, floating in the dark. Safe, held enough. Breathe in, breathe out. Let it, let L. The lake carry you, gentle and slow, into dreams where the maze always grows tall. The frogs always sing in tune, and the ghosts of the chinampas rock you to sleep with songs older than words. Good night.